I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today, I am inundated with beautiful flowers in honor of Mary Poindexter McLaughlin of the Art of Freedom coming to visit me. And of all those flowers, I've decided to highlight cabbage. I also have to thank Fadi Lama. I don't know what kind of magic he pulled, but I already, thanks to his recommendations, have 60 new subscribers today and another 28 followers and 27 followers tomorrow. I don't know how that works, but that's the kind of Zeitheist I can get behind. This is all at thirdparadigm.substack.com, where the deep conversations are happening. Fadi is the author of Why the West Can't Win, which, like my book, is a geoeconomics primer, something that goes back through history and looks at the patterns and says, how are they doing the things that we are being subject to now? The big question is, what is money? What's the purpose of money? A lot of people look at it and say, well, the whole purpose of what they're doing is to get as much money as possible. But that can't be the case because they create the money. So if they were just trying to get as much money as possible, that would be redundant. What the money does is steal our time. And that's why Zeit equals time and heist is what they're doing. And this has always been the case since the creation of money. I've also been interviewed by Doc Malik to be released at a future date on the first section of my book, How to Dismantle an Empire. To my delight, he did a 90-minute deep dive into the first section, which is called Pieces of Slave, in what he would like to have be a tutorial, something that is an ongoing series and goes through the whole book. In that section, I talk about David Graeber's, what he terms the coinage taxation military triangle. And this is from his book, Debt. In that, he says the reason for coinage was to make taxation easier so that you could usurp the labor of the territories you had already conquered and get their assistance in conquering the next territory. So instead of collecting bushels of grain and then sending your army out with cows and armor and everything that you needed to equip them and take care of them while they're fighting, and then needing to pay them with the treasury that you had done the conquest to steal. Instead, what you did was create this coinage out of your treasure, and you spread it to your soldiers, and then they paid the people who were already there because those people were going to be taxed. And if those people couldn't come up with the tax, they would end up being slaves. They'd sell their wives, their children, and then themselves. This created a machine, a self-propelling conquest machine that didn't need you to really take care of it. It just ran itself, and you were able to co-opt everyone into being a part of that. I think this was the very beginning of cognitive dissonance, because what you're doing is something that is paying the slave price, really, for yourself, for your loved ones. But in the process of paying that slave price so you can be free, you are enslaving your neighbors. You're enslaving the other territories. You're colonizing everyone else. And then they're going ahead and doing the same thing. So you can't think, I'm a good person, without putting that together and saying, oh, wait, I'm not really a good person. So in your mind, you have to keep those two categories separate. And that creates that disconnect where you can't think clearly about ethics. What is money? Money is a means of organizing labor in the interest of whoever creates it. If the community is creating the money especially backed by the housing, the way that Benjamin Franklin's plan was, the way that my plan is. Then you have a way of doing community projects that benefit everyone. Debt isn't a bad thing, nor is debt with interest. That's been called usury, and I think that's a definition that's been changed. Let's say that I'm going to sell my house, and I would really like to sell it to you, but there's a hedge fund over here, and they can pay cash, and they can pay me the full amount. And you say, well, I can do a down payment, and I can pay you over 30 years. If I take your deal with no interest, I can only lose because they're going to pay me the full boat right away. But if you're going to pay me, say, 5% interest a year, then I could say, yeah, that seems fair. And let's say there's a time when you can't make your payments. Rather than repossessing the house, I know that you're going to be paying a little more interest, and that's fair too. So that's actually a very good system. I think the word usury really relates to usurping. And who I call the people who are doing this is the usurpers, because what they do is come in and usurp ownership of the house. They're issuing the credit against it with no money of their own, and that credit becomes what is used for taxation. So you have the collusion between the bankers and the government because the government is validating the money that is issued by the bankers. This credit created out of thin air is what they demand in taxes. But taxes themselves, that's not a bad thing either. If the government, and when I say government, I mean community. I mean a locus of control that is a few thousand people. That's what my system does. If you have them issuing the money, this credit that is for local exchange and backed by the houses, and they collect taxes on it, it means, again, you have a self-perpetuating system, but one that is constructive, not one that is destructive. When the bankers usurp the exclusive privilege of government to issue the money and the credit against the property, they then collect the interest, and that becomes their profits, and they pass it to their other hand as venture capitalists. And they hire corporations with employees whose job it is to bring in multiples of whatever they're paying them. So that corners the market on whatever gets left over that you're not already paying for your mortgage or your rent. We see banks and corporations as heroes. They're exactly who we want to court so that the banks will give us loans, and we want to protect our credit history and do everything we can for that. And we want to make sure we build up our resume and that we are a good catch so that corporations will give us money. Both of them are the benefactors of as we see it. We see the government as parasites because they take our money. But really, this is the exact opposite. The banks are the parasites because they have usurped ownership of the properties and therefore ownership of our lives. They then sprinkle that money around in order for us to go and fetch them more money. But government is left as having no power whatsoever because they cannot create any kind of money in order to organize our time for our own benefit. And this is where I think it is also the geistheist, because Geist, like ghost, is spirit, is breath. And what we've lost is our own spirits. Our souls have been sucked out in order to serve the usurpers. We no longer have control over our own time, our own purpose. And that's what we need to get back. In what to recommend next, I'm going to follow the spirit and say self-care in an apocalypse, which says when the going gets tough, the tough slow down. And another one that mentions Fadi Lama of World War III versus worldwide wrestling, reading between enemy lines. Thank you for watching.